Hollywood remembers her for the sparkle in her laugh, the light in her eyes, and the effortless way she turns screen roles into legends. But beneath the sunshine of Goldie Hawn's persona lies a darker story, a story of battles fought quietly, of dignity tested in the shadows of men who underestimated her. At 78, Goldie finally reveals the 6 actors she could never forgive and the reasons why their names linger in her memory. 1. Chevy Chase, the comedic dream that turned to nightmare. Picture the year 1978. The cameras roll on Foul Play and audiences swoon at the pairing. Goldie Hawn, America's sweetheart, and Chevy Chase, the new king of sly humor. On screen, they were magic. Behind the camera, it was chaos. Chevy Chase had just rocketed to fame through Saturday Night Live. He arrived with swagger, armed with arrogance as much as wit. Crew members whispered about his moods, charming one moment, volcanic the next. On the set of Foul Play, his ego overshadowed the script. Goldie, ever the professional, showed up prepared, disciplined, eager to craft something great. Chevy, however, treated the set like his personal stage. He rewrote lines without warning, tossed aside entire scenes if they didn't amuse him, and openly undermined the director, Colin Higgins. Higgins, a soft-spoken but firm creative voice, was left powerless as Chevy bulldozed through the process. The worst came in his treatment of others. Lighting technicians, makeup artists, even production assistants. Chevy dismissed them all with sharp words and sarcastic jabs. One crew member recalled him hurling a prop across the set in anger when a microphone accidentally dipped into frame. For Goldie, whose hallmark was grace under pressure, this was exhausting. She worked tirelessly to keep spirits up, joking with crew members and diffusing tension when possible. But even she could only endure so much. Chevy often cut her off mid-scene, sneering at her lines, sometimes flatly refusing to film unless his real punchlines were included. He wasn't elevating the comedy, he was clawing for the spotlight. The energy between them grew toxic. Goldie confided quietly to a stylist, "He's not funny when the cameras stop rolling, he's just cruel." By the end of filming, the two stars barely spoke. When producers later floated the idea of a sequel or reunion, Goldie didn't hesitate. She gave her agent one firm instruction: "Not interested." Foul Play may have been a hit with audiences, but for Goldie, it left a scar. Chevy Chase taught her that even comedy can become cruel when ego runs unchecked. She never worked with him again, and she never wanted to. 2. Warren Beatty, charm as a weapon. If Chevy was chaos, Warren Beatty was calculation. In the 1970s, Warren wasn't just an actor, he was Hollywood royalty, known for Bonnie and Clyde, Shampoo, and his infamous reputation as one of the town's most relentless womanizers. His name carried weight. To many, being pursued by Warren Beatty was a mark of validation. To Goldie, it was a trap. At first, she was flattered. Warren courted her with persistence. Lunches, dinners, long conversations laced with compliments. He charmed as easily as he breathed, always hovering just close enough to remind her of his interest. Goldie was sharp. She had built her career on wit as much as talent, and she wasn't about to become another trophy in Beatty's collection. She turned him down gracefully, again and again. No drama, no scenes, just polite refusals. But Warren wasn't used to hearing no, especially from a woman who wasn't dazzled by his myth. That's when the cracks in his charm began to show. Suddenly, whispers began to circulate around town. Subtle but damaging rumors. Goldie was difficult, flaky, too cute for serious roles. Casting directors hesitated. Scripts disappeared from her desk. Meetings were canceled. Industry insiders later recognized it for what it was. Sabotage, not overt, not explosive, but slow, insidious, and effective. Warren Beatty's bruised ego had quietly poisoned her reputation in the rooms where decisions were made. A producer even recalled being warned, "Goldie has baggage." But the only baggage, in truth, was Warren's resentment. Goldie never spoke publicly about him. When asked in interviews whether she'd work with Beatty, she gave a line that said everything without naming names. "I don't mix business with power plays." Privately, however, she was more direct. Friends recalled her describing him as a man who doesn't handle rejection. He punishes it. Years later, fate brought them face-to-face at an awards show. Beatty approached her with that famous grin, ready to resume the dance. Goldie smiled too, but hers was cool, icy, final. She turned and walked away. A journalist nearby whispered, "That smile could freeze hell." Goldie didn't rant. She didn't write exposés. She simply outlasted him. Beatty's legacy became a tangle of ego and gossip. Goldie's legacy, grace, resilience, and the power of walking away. 3. Bill Murray, chaos. Disguised as genius. By the late 1980s, Goldie Hawn had cemented her reputation. She was no longer just the wide-eyed ingenue or the giggling blonde. She was a seasoned professional, trusted by studios, adored by audiences, and admired for her ability to balance comedy with heartfelt sincerity. So, when the idea of pairing her with Bill Murray surfaced, the industry buzzed with excitement. On paper, it was a dream: Goldie, the queen of charisma, and Murray, the wild card of comedy. But what should have been a perfect union quickly spiraled into something darker. The trouble began at the very first table read. Goldie, punctual and prepared as always, arrived on time. Murray, by contrast, strolled in over an hour late. No apology, no greeting. Just a disruptive entrance, capped off by tossing his script onto the table as if it were an afterthought. The room shifted. Writers sat nervously, producers exchanged glances. Goldie, ever the professional, offered a smile, hoping to ease the tension, but Murray wasn't there to collaborate. He was there to dominate. Instead of reading the lines as written, he hijacked the material. He tossed out improvisations, mocked the dialogue, and undercut the emotional beats the script had been carefully crafted to deliver. When Goldie spoke, he rolled his eyes, pulled faces, or mimed boredom like a schoolboy mocking his teacher. The most cutting moment came during an emotional monologue. Goldie was delivering sincerity, grounding the scene with vulnerability. Murray interrupted, smirk on his face, and said loudly, "Why don't you try acting like you've done drama before?" The room erupted, not with genuine laughter, but with the uneasy chuckles of people caught between power and discomfort. Goldie didn't lash out. She didn't defend herself. She simply closed her script, stood, and walked out. She never returned. Her representatives contacted the producers the next day with a simple message: Goldie was out. No negotiation, no second chances. Behind the scenes, the whispers began. One insider said, "Murray thinks unpredictability is genius, but for everyone else it's exhausting." Another added, "He confuses cruelty with spontaneity." For Goldie, the damage wasn't just about one role. It was about the larger pattern she'd endured for decades. Men disguising arrogance as artistry, expecting women to absorb the fallout with a smile. From that moment, Goldie made a vow. She would no longer sign on to projects where her role was to play the steady hand to a chaos agent. She chose peace over prestige. In interviews years later, when asked why she stepped back from certain comedies, she would only smile and say, "I chose peace." It wasn't just a decision about Bill Murray, it was a declaration about her worth. 4. Sean Penn, the cynic who tried to diminish her. If Bill Murray left Goldie exhausted, Sean Penn left her disillusioned. It happened at a charity gala in Malibu, an event close to Goldie's heart. She had long been an advocate for emotional well-being, particularly for children, and the evening was meant to raise awareness for mental health. Goldie was slated to speak, delivering a heartfelt message about kindness in an industry and a world that often demanded performance over authenticity. As she rose to take the stage, all eyes turned. But at one table, Sean Penn leaned back in his chair, already restless. He rolled his eyes dramatically, sighed loudly, and muttered under his breath, "Another celebrity wellness sermon." Some laughed uncomfortably, others looked away. Goldie pressed on. She delivered her speech with steady warmth, speaking not of fame, but of compassion. When she finished, polite applause filled the room. But then, cutting through the noise, Penn's voice rang out, unmistakable. She should stick to giggling. The words hung in the air like smoke. Some gasped, others pretended not to hear. Goldie paused for just a fraction of a second, then smiled gracefully, raised her glass, and returned to her table. She didn't break, not in public, but in the car ride home, the facade cracked. According to close friends, she didn't cry because she was embarrassed. She cried because she was tired. "My whole career," she reportedly said, "and I'm still reduced to giggles by men who don't know what I stand for." What made Penn's cruelty cut deeper was its intent. Murray had been chaotic, careless. Penn was deliberate. He had chosen to diminish her in a room designed for healing at a moment meant to inspire. Goldie's response was quiet but resolute. From that night forward, she kept her distance. No panels, no joint interviews, no stage photos. When asked about Penn in later years, she gave only 3 words: "Not my energy." Privately, she was sharper. You can believe in activism without stomping on someone else's purpose. To Goldie, Penn wasn't just one difficult man. He represented something larger, a Hollywood that rewarded cynicism and punished optimism, where men were praised for brooding intensity while women were dismissed for joy. Goldie refused to let that version of Hollywood define her. She didn't fight Penn, she erased him from her map, silent, permanent, unshakable. 5. Dustin Hoffman. Method or manipulation? Not every betrayal happens on a film set. Sometimes it unfolds in the quiet sterility of a casting room. For Goldie Hawn, one of the most humiliating moments of her career came not in front of an audience but in front of a handful of producers, with Dustin Hoffman as the ringleader. This was the late 1970s. Goldie was eager to prove herself beyond comedy. Known for her sparkle and charm, she wanted depth. She wanted to show Hollywood that she was more than a punchline or a pair of big blue eyes. So, when the opportunity arose to audition for a serious drama, one already attached to Hoffman, the industry's darling of method acting, she grabbed it. On paper, it was electric. Two Oscar-winning talents, two icons from opposite ends of the tonal spectrum. For Goldie, this could have been the role to redefine her career. The audition began. Nervous but determined, Goldie delivered her lines with focus and heart. But barely a few sentences in, Hoffman cut her off. Flat, cold, without warning. "You're not connecting," he declared. The room froze. Scripts stiffened in laps. Producers exchanged awkward glances. Goldie tried to continue, but Hoffman wasn't finished. Turning to the producers with a smirk, he twisted the knife. "She's still playing it like a sitcom." The men in the room laughed, not out of joy, but out of complicity, nervous chuckles that signaled power dynamics at play. What should have been a collaboration became public. Dissection, with Goldie laid out as the subject. This wasn't direction, it wasn't feedback, it was humiliation, delivered with surgical cruelty. Hoffman wasn't sharpening the scene, he was sharpening his ego. Goldie didn't storm out, she didn't crumble, she locked in, finished the scene, and held her dignity like armor. But inside, something shifted. She realized that no matter how many Oscars she held, to some men she would always be the ditzy blonde, the girl from Laugh In, the prop who wasn't meant to challenge their authority. The next morning, she called her agent and dropped out. No fight, no second chances, just a single line that echoed among her closest friends for years. "I won't fight to be taken seriously by men who already decided I'm a punchline." The role went to someone else. The film moved on. Hoffman's career remained untouched, but the story traveled quietly through the industry. People remembered the moment not as proof of Goldie's inadequacy, but as evidence of Hoffman's cruelty. Later, in a rare interview, Goldie spoke carefully. "In this business, some men forget they're not directing the women around them." Privately, though, she admitted the scar remained, not because she lost the role, but because for a fleeting second she questioned her instincts, something she had always trusted. That, she later wrote in her journal, was the true betrayal. "He tried to shrink me. I won't let him." And she didn't. Goldie stopped chasing Hollywood's definition of legitimacy. She carved her own. She leaned into comedy, not because she lacked dramatic range, but because she refused to let men like Hoffman dictate the terms of her respect. It wasn't a retreat, it was a reclamation. 6. Kirk Douglas. Death by 1,000 Cuts. If Hoffman tried to humiliate Goldie outright, Kirk Douglas represented something subtler, quieter, but no less corrosive. Condescension dressed as gallantry. To the world, Douglas was a titan, the rugged face of old Hollywood masculinity, the gladiator, the pioneer, a man revered across generations as the embodiment of a golden era. Goldie, raised on that very mythology, respected him. She valued legacy. She always acknowledged the giants on whose shoulders she stood. But reverence is not the same as admiration. And as the years passed, Goldie came to realize that Douglas never saw her as an equal, only as decoration on the scaffolding of his world. At countless industry events, Douglas approached her with slow hand kisses, theatrical winks, and booming greetings that others dismissed as harmless charm. Goldie smiled politely, but inside it gnawed at her. "He talks to me like I'm still the blonde in a bikini scene," she confided once, "and I've won an Oscar." There was no single outburst, no public feud. It was worse, death by 1,000 cuts. Panels where she was interrupted mid-thought, round tables where her insights were skimmed over while men were praised as visionaries. Scripts she had helped shepherd introduced with flowery praise for the men involved, while she was described only as the effervescent Goldie Hawn. The final straw came during a development meeting for a film she was co-producing. Douglas showed up unexpectedly, a favor to someone in the room. Goldie began outlining the emotional core of the script. Mid-sentence, Douglas cut in with a quip. "Goldie always knows how to sell emotion." The room laughed. Goldie didn't. She closed her notebook, stood, and said calmly, "I've said what I need to say. No fireworks, just finality." From then on, she maintained civility, but never more. In public, she praised Michael Douglas, his son, for being a listener, a partner. But when asked about Kirk, she skipped his name entirely, not by accident. "Some men don't deserve a second act in your memory," she told a friend. To Goldie, Kirk Douglas wasn't a villain. He was a mirror, reflecting the deeply ingrained belief that a woman's smile mattered more than her voice. He embodied an era she outlived, an era she refused to let define her story. For every hand kiss, she gave a nod. For every chuckle, she gave distance. And for every attempt to freeze her as the ditzy blonde, she reclaimed her narrative. Goldie Hawn didn't just survive Kirk Douglas's version of Hollywood, she outlasted it. 7. The Final Reflection. Outlasting Hollywood's giants. 6 men. 6 names etched into the legacy of Hollywood. Chevy Chase, volatile and cruel behind the smirk. Warren Beatty, charming until rejected, then vengeful in silence. Bill Murray, chaos disguised as genius. Sean Penn, deliberate cynicism wielded like a weapon. Dustin Hoffman, intellect turned into humiliation. And Kirk Douglas, the old guard, smothering with condescension, disguised as charm. Each one left a mark on Goldie Hawn's journey, not in the way they intended, but in the lessons she carried forward. From Chevy, she learned that cruelty often hides behind laughter. From Beatty, that some men punish rejection more than failure. From Murray, that not all genius is worth enduring. From Penn, that cynicism can be more poisonous than rage. From Hoffman, that humiliation can break trust but not spirit. And from Douglas, that even legends can fail to see the woman standing before them. What makes Goldie's story remarkable is not the pain, but the grace with which she endured it. She never lashed out. She never staged public feuds. She never allowed bitterness to define her. Instead, she walked away again and again, choosing dignity over spectacle, peace over chaos. In an industry built on power plays and fragile egos, Goldie Hawn did something radical. She set boundaries. She said no. She refused to carry men's baggage just to keep her place at the table, and she kept smiling, not because she was naive, but because she understood that joy, her joy, was her greatest act of defiance. At 78, when asked about these encounters, she didn't rant or rage. She simply acknowledged them. She called them what they were, and then she left them in the past where they belonged. 8. Goldie's legacy. Hollywood will always have its storms. The men she named, and many she didn't, are reminders of an industry that too often rewarded arrogance and dismissed women's voices. But Goldie Hawn is proof that storms pass. Her career outlasted theirs. Her laughter is still remembered, her performances still cherished. And the men who underestimated her, they are remembered not for their cruelty, but for the fact that Goldie endured them and triumphed anyway. As she once wrote in her journal, "He tried to shrink me. I won't let him." That's not just her story. That's her legacy. So, what do you think about the 6 actors Goldie Hawn finally admitted she could never stand? Were you surprised by the names or by the quiet strength with which she handled them? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden battles, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain.